Final Fantasy II is the second installment in the Final Fantasy series. It's notable for being one of the first story-intensive RPGs released for a console system, and for being the first game in the series to feature many elements that would later become staples of the Final Fantasy franchise, including chocobos and a character by the name of Cid. Final Fantasy II is also unique for eliminating the traditional experience-based advancement system, instead favoring a system where playable characters' statistics increase according to either how much they are required or how much they're used. In other words, a character who frequently casts magic spells would have their proficiency at casting increase faster than a character who specializes in physical attacks. This was called the skill-based advancement system, and it would later return in Final Fantasy XI. Although abandoned in subsequent installments in the series, a similar system was adopted by the Saga series, also produced by Square. As a side note, Final Fantasy II was actually designed by Akitoshi Kawazu, who later designed the Saga series, rather than Hironobu Sakaguchi, the series creator. Because of the series' popularity in America during the 90s, Final Fantasy II was one of the first games to undergo fan translation, in this case by a user named Neo Demiforce. Final Fantasy II was originally scored by Nobuo Uematsu, and it was Uematsu's 17th work of video game music. The game's music on the WonderSwan Color, PlayStation, Game Boy Advance, and PlayStation Portable remakes, however, was arranged by Tsuyoshi Sekito. As stated, Final Fantasy II is unique in the Final Fantasy series for not utilizing experience-based levels. Instead of earning experience points at the end of every battle, each character participating in the battle develops depending on what actions the character takes during the battle. For example, characters who frequently use a particular type of weapon, a sword, a bow, an axe, etc., will become more adept at wielding a weapon of that type, as well as increasing their physical strength. Similarly, characters who frequently cast a particular magic spell will learn to cast more powerful versions of that spell, as well as increasing their magical power. HP and MP, health and magic points, will similarly increase depending on need. A character who ends a battle with only a small amount of health remaining may earn an increase to their maximum amount of hit points, and a character who expends the majority of their magic points during a single battle may increase their maximum amount of magic points. Battle parties can consist of up to 4 characters at a time. 3 of these characters are present throughout the entire game, but the 4th position rotates amongst a variety of characters. Final Fantasy II was the first game in the series to allow a friendly character to be placed in the back row during battles. Characters placed in the back row are immune to most physical attacks, but they could be harmed with bows and magic. Throughout the course of the game, when in conversation with non-playable characters, or NPCs, the player has the ability to learn special words or phrases, which can later be repeated to other NPCs to gain more information or unlock new actions. Similarly, there exist a handful of special items that can be shown to NPCs during conversation, which have the same effect. I've always found it incredibly strange that a system similar to this has never come back in future games. It's something incredibly interesting, and I only really ever got to play Final Fantasy II on the PSP. I'd never played it before that. And I always thought that was a system that was added in the PSP version, and not one that existed in the original Nintendo, because I didn't think something like that could really happen on that hardware. I'd kind of like to see it come back in a future title, just to see like what they could do with it, or how they could maybe relate it to things. Maybe it'd be like the information in 12, where if you killed monsters and got certain types of items, like I think skeletons gave you bone marrow and stuff, you would learn more information in the bestiaries. I always thought that was kind of cool. Maybe tie it into that somehow. I don't know. Final Fantasy II was the first game in the series to have an actual main cast of characters with names and histories. The first three characters are never changed in the party, whilst the fourth character is continuously changing. Firion, or Firionel in the Japanese version, is the main character. He's the adopted friend of Maria and Leon, and a childhood friend of Guy. He seeks to destroy the Empire in hopes of avenging his fallen family. Maria is Guy and Firion's childhood friend and the female lead. She quests in the hopes of finding her brother Leon, who disappeared after being attacked by the Empire. Guy is a friend of Firion and Maria. He speaks in a stunted manner and has the ability to talk to animals. However, this is a unique ability and is only used once in the entire game. Leon is Maria's older brother and the new Dark Knight of Palamecia. He went missing during the attack on Fynn and has since grown to be the Emperor's most faithful follower. Late in the game, he joins the trio and helps them defeat the final boss. Minwu is a white mage and Hilda's personal advisor. He joins the party during their first adventures and is learned in the arts of magic. Joseph is a miner and helps the Resistance gain mithril. He joins the party only for a short time, but his small contribution matters greatly in the end. Gordon is the Prince of Kushan and fled from the battle after his brother Scott died in the battle for Fynn. He believes himself to be a coward, and to prove himself fit for the throne, he journeys with Firion and his allies to aid in the defeat of the Empire. Layla is a pirate who attempts to rob the party, but her crew is weak and Firion, Maria, and Guy easily defeat them. She repents and decides only to attack the Empire instead. Ricard Highwind is the last dragoon of Deist. Having been stuck in the Leviathan for some time, he's quite eager to return to action and stop the Empire in order to avenge his fallen allies. Scott is a prince of Kushan and the older brother of Gordon. The story begins when Emperor Maetius of Palameceia summons forth monsters from hell in his quest to dominate the world. Firion, Maria, Guy, and Leon are orphaned when the Empire attacks Fynn, and they are cut down by Imperial soldiers as they flee. Firion, Maria, and Guy are rescued by forces belonging to the Wild Rose Rebellion, led by Princess Hilda, and taken to Altair to be revived, but Leon has gone missing. Though they ask to join the rebellion, Hilda refuses due to their youth and inexperience. Despite this, Firion, Guy, and Maria return to Fynn and find Prince Scott on his deathbed. He tells the party of Count Bergen's betrayal and asks them to encourage his brother Gordon, who is afraid to join the rebels. Scott asks them not to tell Hilda his feelings for her and gives them a ring to take back just before he dies. Returning Scott's ring convinces Hilda that Firion's group is strong enough to join the fight. She sends the group to Salamand in search of mithril. Joseph, a member of the rebellion, was sent to search for it, but Hilda hasn't heard anything from him since. Hilda's right-hand man, Minwu, also joins the party for this mission. The party finds Joseph, but he is unwilling to give any information as the Palamecian Empire has kidnapped his daughter Nellie, and Borgen has threatened to kill her if Joseph helps the resistance. He tells them to go to the Summit Falls and free her, along with the townspeople who have been slaved in the mines. They do so and also rescue Paul, a thief in the rebellion's employ. After defeating one of the Imperial sergeants, the party take the mithril and make their way back to Altair. After the weaponsmith Tobal creates mithril equipment for the resistance, the party is dispatched to Bafsk. The Palamecian Empire have enslaved the residents and made them build a powerful airship known as the Dreadnought. It was built under the watchful eye of an Imperial known as the Dark Knight, but he was replaced by Borgen after the loss of the mithril. This gives the resistance the perfect opportunity to destroy the Dreadnought before it's finished. However, just before the party reaches the massive airship from the Bafsk sewers, the Dark Knight, who actually has not left Bafsk after all, takes control of the airship and lifts off. The Dreadnought attacks the cities of Poft, Palum, Gatria, and Altair, but miraculously leaves the secret base at Altair unharmed. Minwu leaves the party to care for the ailing king, and after talking to Sid, owner of the world's other airship, Hilda and the party decide to obtain Sunfire from Kushan Keep. To enter, they need either the goddess's bell or the voice of a Kushan. Joseph helps the party reach the snow cave with the snowcraft, and the party retrieves the bell located within. On the way out, Borgin attacks the party, and although he is defeated, he sends a boulder after them. Joseph holds back the boulder to allow the party to escape and is crushed. With heavy hearts but renewed determination to avenge Joseph, the party heads for the abandoned kingdom of Kushan to retrieve the Sunfire. They enter the keep and find Gordon, who came to it of his own free will, but was unable to make it past the monsters inside. He joins the party and helps them to locate Eagle's torch, the only vessel they can use to carry the Sunfire. The party defeats a red soul for the torch and retrieves the Sunfire. As they leave, they witness Sid's airship being captured by the Dreadnought, which then parks to replenish fuel supplies in the far south. The party heads there, frees Sid and Hilda, who was on board Sid's ship, and throws the Sunfire into the Dreadnought's engine as directed by Sid. They meet the Dark Knight in the engine room, and Maria recognizes his voice, but they have no time to escape, just before the airship is destroyed. The party returns triumphantly to Altair, only to learn the king is about to die. With his last breaths, he plans a three-pronged attack on the Empire in an attempt to take back Finn. In his plan, Minwu heads to Mysidia to retrieve Ultima, the ultimate magic tome. Gordon takes command of the rebel army to attack Finn directly, and Firian's party heads to the island nation of Deist to enlist the aid of dragoons. Hilda has started behaving strangely and retires to her chambers. The party accepts passage from Layla, who reveals that she is a pirate captain and tries to mug the party. When they defeat her and her crew, she is impressed and joins them. They reach Deist, but find that the dragoons have fallen in battle, and only a single wyvern remains alive. The beast is dying, poisoned by the Empire. It gives the party the last wyvern egg, which the party drops in the healing spring at the bottom of Deist Cavern in order to incubate it and hasten its growth process. The party returns to Altair empty-handed, and Firian learns that Hilda is actually a Lamia queen in disguise. They learn the real Hilda is being held as a prize in the tournament at the Palamecian Colosseum. The party, with Gordon in tow, make haste to reach Hilda, defeating a behemoth at the Colosseum to earn Hilda as a prize. However, the Emperor, who is overseeing the match personally, dispatches the party and has them thrown in the dungeons. They are saved by Paul, who unlocks their cell. Hilda and Gordon escape on their own while the rest of the party draws the guards' attention. The rebel army plans to attack Finn and encamps outside the town. Firian, Maria, Guy, and Layla lead the attack and defeat the Imperial Castellan, Gotos, from earning the rebels an important victory. However, Minwu and the Ultima Tome are nowhere to be found, so Hilda instructs the party to look for Minwu and retrieve the tome from the Mysidian Tower. After obtaining the crystal rod from the trials on the tropical island, the party heads for the tower, only to be swallowed by the Leviathan. Shipwrecked and separated from Layla, the party works its way from Leviathan's innards to the mouth, where, with the help of Ricard Highwind the Dragoon, they are able to retake the ship by defeating a roundworm. They head for the tower with Ricard, best the Fire Gigas, Ice Gigas, and Thunder Gigas, and find Minwu at the Chamber of the Seal. He has been waiting for Firian's group to arrive. Once they are there, he uses his life force to break the seal. The party takes Ultima and returns to Finn, but they discover that the towns of Altair, Gatria, Palum, and Poft have been utterly destroyed by a mysterious force known as the Cyclone. It threatens to tear the world asunder if the party cannot figure out how to stop it. Hilda tells them that a pendant can be used to call wyverns in a chamber at the top of the castle, and Paul gives them the item. The pendant calls the young wyvern that is just hatched at Deist, and they fly it into the cyclone. They infiltrate the fortress inside the storm and manage to defeat the Emperor. A victory celebration is held at Finn, but it is soon interrupted by the news that the Dark Knight is Maria's long-lost brother Leon, and he has crowned himself Emperor. Sid, dying after the attack on Palum, gives the party his airship, and they fly to Palamecia. Leon refuses Maria's pleas and prepares to battle, but the Emperor returns from Hell, now more powerful than ever, and reclaims his throne. Rickard sacrifices himself in battle against the Emperor so that the others can escape on the Wyvern. After Rickard's death, the Dark Emperor raises Castle Pandemonium, the fortress for the Lord of Hell, to start a new empire. Leon agrees to join the party at Firian's behest, and they set out to prepare for the final battle. After returning to Dis to earn the Excalibur, the treasured sword of the Dragoons, the party fights its way through the Jade Passage, entering Pandemonium from underneath as all other forms of approach are impossible. Inside the castle, the party fights its way through several of the Emperor's most powerful minions, including an undead Borgin, en route to the Emperor's throne at the top of the castle. A fierce battle ensues as the Emperor attempts to destroy the last hope of the Resistance. Despite his powerful spells and his ability to call down meteors, Firion and the others defeat him for good. They return to Castle Finn, where Hilda, Gordon, Nellie, Layla, and Paul all wait to congratulate the party on the victory. In the battle's aftermath, life begins anew for everyone. However, Leon takes his leave of them, feeling that too much has happened between them for him to stay. Maria protests, but Firion says that they'll be waiting when Leon is ready to return. With the war's end, the monsters called from Hell vanish without a trace, and the world returns to peace, eventually to forget the bitter memories save for the efforts of the young heroes who saved them all. In the Game Boy Advance and PSP versions, a new story, titled Soul of Rebirth, tells the tales of the 4 party members who died defending Firion and his party in an attempt to see the Emperor defeated. Minwu wakes up to find himself in a mysterious cave and tries to figure out where he is. He soon finds Scott, the Prince of Kushan, who had died earlier on in the game. After defeating a few soldiers, the two find Joseph, who is confronted by a hideous zombie version of Borgin. The 3 of them defeat Borgin and start searching for answers about where they are. They find Rickard, who is fighting the Roundworm, and aid him in battle. He then joins Minwu's party. The party finds their way out of the passage, where they learn that they are, in fact, in the afterlife. The town of Mackinac was built as a safe house for all the souls trapped in this unknown dimension. Here, they find Sid, Tobal, and other rebels who helped build the place and who encouraged the party to explore the other 2 mysterious portals that appeared in Mackinac long ago. After adjusting themselves to the difficult battles of the afterlife, Minwu and the party enter one of the portals, and find themselves in the Chamber of the Seal, Minwu's resting place. Again, Minwu must break the seal. However, this time, he is powerful enough to break the seal without sustaining any fatal injuries. The party enters the chamber and attempts to claim Ultima, but are met with the guardian of the spell in the afterlife, the Ultima weapon. After a fierce duel, the party is able to defeat the monster and claim Ultima as their own. This leaves one final portal, which leads to the Unknown Palace. Like Pandemonium before it, the palace is guarded by fierce creatures and contains some of the most powerful equipment in the game. Specifically, Minwu's party finds 4 exclusive pieces of equipment: the Stardust Rod for Minwu, the Wild Rose for Scott, the Bracers for Joseph, and the Wyvern Lance for Rickard. After all the battles, the party meets the Light Emperor, who asks for forgiveness for the dark side's actions. The Light Emperor tells them he split into 2 entities when he was originally defeated, and that Firion and the party defeated the dark half of him in Pandemonium. He also explains they are actually in Araba, the passage to heaven, and that they can finally rest in peace. The 4 are led to believe his words. However, the subconscious souls of their still living friends and family appear to tell them they must not be fooled by the Light Emperor, because, in reality, he is just as evil as the Dark Emperor. The party recover their lost will to fight and defeat the Light Emperor. After his defeat, the 4 heroes return, at least in spirit, to Castle Finn, where they witness the events that played out at the end of the regular game. These events are told from their perspective this time, and the player is given an explanation as to why Firion saw the ghosts of the 4 dead heroes at the regular game's conclusion. The story ends with Minwu, Scott, Joseph, and Rickard finally fading away, presumably going to heaven for real this time. Final Fantasy II was originally scored by Nobuo Uematsu, and it was his 17th work of video game composition. The game's music was arranged by Tsuyoshi Sekito for the WonderSwan Color, PlayStation, and Game Boy Advance remakes, and he also composed 2 new boss battle themes for these releases. There was also a batch of music themes for the Famicom version that were unreleased for reasons unknown. Some of this music was not in the original game, but is taken from Tadatovsky's Swan Lake Ballet. Final Fantasy II had 3 unused themes composed by Nobuo Uematsu: an airship theme, removed for being too happy for this rather dark game, a dungeon theme, removed from the game, but later reused in Final Fantasy VI, and a shop theme, ultimately removed for being far too similar to the shop theme from the original Final Fantasy. The 4 unused tracks in the Nintendo version are officially titled Shop Theme, Airship Theme, Battle Scene 3, and Dungeon Theme. The Dungeon theme is the one that's later reused as the Magic House in Final Fantasy VI. For those interested in hearing what these sound like, here's the Shop theme. Here's the airship theme. Here's Battle Scene 3. Here's the dungeon theme. And for comparison, here's the version used in Final Fantasy VI of Dungeon Theme, called the Magic House. Unlike in the first Final Fantasy, the player can't create their own characters in Final Fantasy II, and there is no job system. There are two reasons for this. The first being that Final Fantasy II was intended to be a more story-driven game than the first Final Fantasy, and would need specific characters to fulfill the roles within the story. The second reason was the idea that the system would be more about nurture than nature. The player doesn't choose a character in the beginning, but they can make them grow in a certain way, eventually becoming anything the player set them up to be. When making the system, the developers didn't anticipate it would lead to a system where players could easily exploit it. The ability to hit party members was included so players could hit sleeping characters and wake them up, but instead people used it to grind levels. Final Fantasy II was originally released for the Nintendo Family Computer, or the Nintendo system as we know it, in Japan in 1988. There was some initial talk that either Nintendo of America or Squaresoft, Square's Northern American subsidiary, might localize the title for American audiences, as has been done with its predecessor in 1990. Such a project was announced, and an early prototype cartridge was produced in 1991 as Final Fantasy Dark Shadow over Palacia, but the game was ultimately cancelled in favor of the more recent Final Fantasy IV. The game was never released outside of Asia in its original form. Enhanced remakes of the game were later issued for the Bandai WonderSwan Color, the PlayStation, as part of the Final Fantasy Origins collection, the Game Boy Advance as part of the Final Fantasy 1 and 2 Dawn of Souls collection, and the PlayStation Portable. Final Fantasy II was, for the first time, released in Europe and other regions when it became part of the Origins compilation. Following the successful release of the original Final Fantasy by Nintendo in 1990, Squaresoft began work on an English-language localization of Final Fantasy II. Assigned to the project was Kaoru Moriyama, whose later work included script translations for Final Fantasy IV and Secret of Mana. Although a beta version was produced and the game was advertised in several Squaresoft trade publications, the age of the original Japanese game and the arrival of the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, the Nintendo's successor, led Squaresoft to cancel work on the Final Fantasy II localization in favor of the recently released Final Fantasy IV, which, to avoid confusion for North American gamers, was retitled Final Fantasy II to reflect the jump in releases. The English script for the prototype version is clunky and erroneous, but it was only the preliminary version and it was cut down in length to fit the text area. The project was cancelled before the script was refined. Even at the prototype stages, changes had been made from the original version due to the religious imagery policies Nintendo had at the time. The Star of David used in the dungeon design was replaced with a triangle, and the cross that replaces a character's face on the pause screen at death was replaced with a gravestone. In 2003, when the game was finally released to English-speaking audiences as part of Final Fantasy Origins, it was released with a brand new translation produced under the supervision of Akira Kashiwagi. Neo Demi-Force's fan translation, similarly, made use of an original translation, as the existence of the prototype cartridge was not common knowledge at the time. Final Fantasy II is one of several Final Fantasy installments to be novelized. The game's novel is titled Final Fantasy II Muma no Meikyu, or Final Fantasy II Nightmare's Labyrinth. It was only published in Japan, and was written by Kenji Terada, published exclusively by Kadokawa Shoten rather than Squaresoft. As part of its Final Fantasy 25th anniversary celebration, Square Enix released a novelization of the first 3 Final Fantasy games. The novelization, titled Novel Final Fantasy 1, 2, 3 Memory of Heroes, was released in fall 2012. Muma no Meikyu reworks the plot of Final Fantasy II, and includes additional information on certain characters, such as the Emperor of Palamecia's real name being Maetius. The novel had some changes to the game's storyline, however, some small ones and some rather major. Due to this, it can only be considered semi-canon. Rickard, Sid, and Joseph are not in the novel at all, and their storylines are completely cut. The novel starts a bit before the start of the game, showing Firion, Leon, Maria, and Guy's normal life. Firion and Maria even end up together at the end of the novel, rather than the ambiguous ending the game gives. Guy's backstory is explained that he was raised by monsters, and thus is able to speak their language, even teaching Firion how to speak Beaver. Guy's ability is more important in the novel, where Rickard's omission means Guy acts as the translator between the Wyvern and the party. Borgin, for some reason in the novelization, is a black mage. Emperor Maetius' backstory and character is explained in depth in the novel. It's stated that Palamecia is cursed with demonic influences that corrupt its emperors. The devil himself, Satan, desiring to rule the world by human proxy, turns men into malicious masterminds by using everything at his disposal to pollute their thoughts with his malice. The devil originates all the way from the beginning of the world, when he became trapped within the indestructible Stone of Eludia, and swore revenge by any means. After ascending to the throne, Maetius exiles his mother Eru to the deserts of Palamecia, and yet she still spends her life trying to find a way to save him. During the novel, Eru and Minwu team up to find a crystal which can purify the land. It ends up being too late to save Maetius, but it helps bring peace to the world. Maetius' father is stated to have been just as evil as he is, having sold his soul to Satan to gain more power. The Ultima storyline is cropped out completely, and Minwu doesn't die. There's also no pandemonium. Matius is killed when Firion and his friends go to rescue Hilda near the end of the story. The novel's last chapter is about destroying the Stone of Eludia, which keeps corrupting all of the Palamecian emperors, and with the crystal created by Minwu and Iru. The Hell version of Matius is actually just Satan taking his likeness. There's a running joke in Japan about Firion's weakness with women. As I've mentioned in the game proper, the Lamia Queen disguises herself as Hilda and seduces him, but in the novel and even in the old school manuals, it states that Firion isn't actually weak with women, he just has profound weakness against feminine charms. It explains his wariness when talking to Lightning and Dissidia, and his reactions to the Shiva summon in that game as well. In Muma no Meikyu, it's stated that he and his adopted sister Maria end up as a couple, and he even spies on her while she bathes in the river. Certainly brings a slightly new meaning to Firion's Japanese nickname, Virgin. I know I said I'd cover Dissidia stuff in another video, but there's just a few tiny tidbits from Dissidia I'd like to kind of divulge involving Firion here that I thought were interesting. According to Dissidia, Firion's only recently learned how to fight. He mentions this when he talks to fellow newbie at the time, Tidus, at the start of his own game, and he has no combat experience. This begs the question of how he mastered so many weapons in such a short time. Firion also mentions that he can control his weapons with magic, allowing him to send them flying at opponents for certain attacks and call them back again. A nifty bit of allusion to Final Fantasy II actually happens in Firion's battle animation. Whenever he shoots off a light arrow, his bow flips forward. Why? This is the animation of bows in the original Final Fantasy II. Though Final Fantasy II used a progression system that wasn't revisited until Final Fantasy XI, its mark in the franchise's history was a big one. Set characters for your party, guest characters that would come and go and die, the introduction of a character named Cid who's always involved with an airship, chocobos, and dragoons, as well as an odd tie-in to a future title. Rickard's adopted son is named Cain, and Cain's father is stated to be named Richard Highwind, since we were allowed more character spaces by Final Fantasy IV's release. Both games also feature a town called Massidia. Add to this the fact that Final Fantasy IV The After Years specifically states that at least the first 6 titles in the series are all in the same universe. That's a discussion for another time. Final Fantasy II also introduced the series tropes of the evil empire, the Bishonen villain who's seeking godhood, party members being killed off for real, and even the presence of any plot at all, which many people seem to think only started with the Super Nintendo and PlayStation 1 era. The next game in our series features a return to form, involving crystals choosing warriors of light to help save the world. This title was also a game not seen in the United States until more recent years. We'll discuss this and more when Final Fantasy III finally escapes the void. Thank you guys so much for watching, and remember, the world is square.